Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be reviewing the M26 T99, of which is a currently 6.3 BR, rank 4 premium medium tank in the American Ground Forces tech tree. It also currently costs 7,480 Golden Eagles. In this video, I'll be going over everything that you need to know about it, including its stats, how it plays, its strengths and weaknesses. I'll give it some scores in several key areas, and then I'll give my final recommendation and if I feel if this vehicle is worth purchasing or not. As always, please consider subscribing if you'd like more content like this, as I always greatly appreciate it. But with that said, let's get into the review. Now to start, I'll place its stat card here on the side of the screen. Important things to note are its power to weight ratio, armament, and armor. Now for how it plays. This is essentially just an M26 Pershing, but with an obvious surprise. This surprise is, of course, the giant array of M8 rockets on either side of the turret, of which can provide capabilities above and beyond a standard M26. For instance, they can one-shot most light vehicles such as light tanks and SPAAs, and can even occasionally kill heavier vehicles with lucky hits, as these rockets generally aren't too accurate. While they can be incredibly effective at ranges below 500 meters, they begin to scatter somewhat heavily as you approach and pass a kilometer of distance, with aiming becoming more difficult by the meter. In this way, this is almost like a rocket shotgun. While enemies become more resistant to these rockets as their armor thicknesses increase, you should be able to either kill or at very least disable most enemies with ease with these rockets by either targeting their cannon or tracks. With that said, these rockets also help tremendously in brawling, turning the so-so M26 into a beast in that role. The standard armament on the Pershing, the 90mm M3 cannon, can only go through just under 200mm of armor at best with its most well-rounded APC-BC shell, though can also pen through nearly 300mm of armor with its APCR shell. This places it solidly into decent to good territory at and around this BR, but is simply nothing special. The M3 cannon should be able to get you kills versus most enemies as easily as almost any other cannon, though of course will not be the best. To this point, the armor is also fairly good, with over 100mm on the front of the hull and turret fronts, tapering to 76mm on the sides, and 51mm of armor on the rear of the hull. This means that at angles and out of range, the M26 should be able to deflect a good amount of shots, especially from lower BR enemies, though of course it is not perfect. The mobility is probably the worst trait of the T99, however, as its power to weight ratio is under 12 horsepower per ton, which is mediocre at this BR. Because of the good gun, average armor, and sub-average mobility, this ends up being a fairly average vehicle, until of course you remember those rocket pods. Those turn this vehicle from an average brawler into something special, making brawling and close quarters combat its specialty, though of course you could also try to use the M26 T99 as a mid-range sniper or support tank, but you have to remember this does not have as good of a cannon as what you'd find on the King Tiger, and thus again it is better just to play mid-range sniping at very most. With all that being said, let's get into its strengths and weaknesses. For its strengths, the M8 rockets, while not very powerful, are typically strong enough to immobilize enemies by destroying tracks or even destroying the enemy's cannon, and can fairly often get kills by barraging enemies, with one of the rockets hitting a weak spot on the enemy and killing the crew. Second, it has a very good M3 90mm cannon, though it can only pen above 200mm of armor with its APCR, which has lackluster post-pen damage. For its third strength, the rockets have low enough velocity to be able to aim over obstacles and occasionally hit enemies on the other side. For its fourth strength, it can fire a smoke shell. Though I've already pretty much mentioned this, it can carry the M304 APCR shell that can pen through most of the toughest flat armors in-game around its BR at close range, including even the Jagdtiger's casemate. For its sixth strength, it has a top-mounted HMG that can damage or destroy lightly armored vehicles as well as aircraft. And finally, the M26 T99 features very good premium RP and SL bonuses. Now for its weaknesses. While the rockets do put on a good show, they typically won't land the killing blow unless hitting lightly armored targets or extremely weak areas of a tank. But you can of course still definitely get kills on hard targets by barraging them with rockets. Second, the mobility on this vehicle isn't as bad as you might think, especially in a straight line, but it's still pretty rough, especially with the extra weight added by the T99 rocket system. For its third weakness, the rockets reload individually when reloading at a base, and take around 10 seconds per M8 rocket to reload, which means that reloading all M8 rockets will take around 7.5 minutes. For its fourth weakness, while it has smoke shells, the M26 T99 lacks smoke grenades, which are of course much more usable than smoke shells. And finally, if the rockets are hit by an enemy shell, they will oftentimes take the Pershing with them in an ammo rack explosion because of course, that's what they are. They're essentially large ammo racks on either side of the turret. But with all that out of the way, let's get into how I score this vehicle. Now first, for armament, I give it an 8 out of 10. The 90mm cannon by itself, while not the best at this BR, is of course still fairly good. In fact, I rated the same 90mm cannon a 6.75 out of 10 in my recent Super Hellcat review, as it still has good armor pen with the HE-filled APC-BC shells, and even better solid shot armor pen with the APCR shells that can go through nearly 300mm of armor. The thing that really separates this from the Super Hellcat is, as you may have guessed, and of course also the standard M26 Pershing, is the inclusion of the rocket pods to provide a surprisingly effective armament. While it tends to be better at close ranges and in salvos, the effectiveness of the rockets cannot be denied, as they will oftentimes one-shot lightly armored vehicles, immobilize or completely disable medium and heavily armored vehicles, will typically blind the enemies that survive for a short period of time, and will even occasionally kill more heavily armored targets with a lucky hit. While this vehicle is by no means a one-shot kill vehicle, it has the advantage of having both the 90mm M3 cannon, which is great in its own right, as well as the 44 114mm rockets to fill the gaps between the shots. Because of this, it has a largely unbroken stream of effective fire, making the M26 T99 incredibly formidable at this BR in terms of armaments. Oh, and we also can't forget, this also has an HMG on top for dealing with anything in the air. Now for mobility, I give it a 3.75 out of 10. While not absolutely terrible, the M26 T99 features a low 11.8 horsepower per ton power to weight ratio, which is safely mediocre at this BR. It'll still be able to get you to where you need, but it will rarely be the first on a cap or to a hot spot. Turning capability is similarly poor, especially when off-road. Now for survivability, I give this a 5.75 out of 10. While the M26 has fairly good armor, it typically won't be able to stop more powerful cannons from the front, such as the 88mm cannon on the King Tiger, and will absolutely be killed by most tanks it will face from the side or the rear. Additionally, being that this is the T99 variant after all, it has a chance that the M8 rockets will explode when hit, which could lead to the tank's destruction. One very unique side effect of these rockets, however, is their ability to completely disable enemy modules such as tracks and cannons, which will allow you to escape enemies in situations where many other tanks simply would not be able to. Additionally, because they cause such a ruckus and because they kick up so much dust and debris and all that, they can temporarily blind enemies, if only for a very short period of time, which can also lead to your escape. Now with that said, overall, I give it a 6.75 out of 10. Because the T99 is essentially only a bonus in terms of firepower and doesn't really take away from survivability compared to the standard M26, I would say that if you like the standard M26, you'll probably love the T99 variant. It is a big upgrade and will get you kills where many other tanks would simply not be able to. Even if you can't kill any enemy with your rockets, you can still disable them, which should allow you to survive slightly better than, of course, the standard M26. Sure, its mobility is definitively lackluster, but it isn't so bad as to be more than an annoyance. Regardless, this feels like an upgrade over the M26, while still maintaining the same BR at least currently. Now with that said, do I recommend this vehicle? In short, yes, but only if you have the Golden Eagles to spare. Quite honestly, it's a very expensive vehicle, even considering what you get, as it costs 7,480 Golden Eagles, which for only 540 more Golden Eagles, you could get the higher ranked T114, or for 1,610 Golden Eagles more, you could purchase the M1128 Wolfpack, both of which will be able to unlock far more of the tech tree than the M26 T99 due to their higher ranks. Heck, we could even compare it to the 6,090 Golden Eagle Super Hellcat that sits at rank 4 alongside the M26 T99. The Super Hellcat costs 1,290 GE less than the T99, but the T99 has better RP and SL reward modifiers, and also has a troll/meme factor, which unfortunately the Super Hellcat lacks. Regardless of comparing the T99 to other vehicles, it is by itself a surprisingly capable vehicle that is essentially a better M26 Pershing without a BR increase. Again, again, at least for now. The rockets give you versatility and can even allow you to escape otherwise hopeless situations unharmed, or better yet, on top. So yes, I do recommend this vehicle and give it my Tankenstein seal of approval, but just know that it carries a relatively high price for what it offers, and that for only slightly more Golden Eagles, you could purchase a rank 5 or rank 6 premium that would likely serve you better for a much longer period of time. But regardless, those are just my thoughts on this beast of a vehicle. Now with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Please let me know what you guys think of the M26 T99 in the comments below, as well as what your thoughts might be on this review. But either way, thanks again, and I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.